Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this series of STEM career role models that STELR program is presenting. As we gather for this meeting from different places around Australia, I'd like to acknowledge the custodians of the lands from which we all meet. I am joining you today from Ngunnawal and Ngambri land, and I pay respect to elders past and present and to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who are joining us today. As we share and discuss our knowledge and practices, we acknowledge the deep knowledge forever embedded in custodianship of country. So this afternoon, we've got the next in our series, and today Dr. Ayesha Tulloch will be talking about her journey and STEM career journey. And I'm really looking forward to hearing about it. So as you'll notice as you came in, this session is being recorded and it will be available on the STELR YouTube channel in a few days. And there is also a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. You'll see a little Q&A. You can click on that and you can put questions in there for Ayesha at any point during the webinar. We will be having a Q&A session at the end. So any questions when they occur to you, you can put it in there and we will get to them as we get to them or at the end of the session. When you log out today, you'll be sent a link for the survey for today's session, and it'd be really great if you could give us some feedback on what you've liked about it, what you would like to see in these in the future, and also, any other feedback you'd like to give us. And after today's session, we will be sending out some worksheets which will help you get a little bit of a deeper understanding about Ayesha's work and the skills involved in it. So let's jump in now, and I'm going to introduce Dr. Ayesha Tulloch to tell you about her STEM career journey.
Thanks, Camille. Thank you for having me, and thank you, for attending this webinar. I'm coming to you from Yagara country, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Just going to share a little screen that I have up here. So today I'm going to tell you a little bit about how to find your dream job that you didn't actually realise was your dream job. And for me, that's being a conservation decision scientist. I'm currently at the Queensland University of Technology, but I also work with the University of Sydney. And yep, that's me with a lemur in Madagascar there on the left. So I guess I sort of wanted to tell you a little bit about how I got here. And in grade 10, I decided I really wanted to work with animals. I'd always loved nature. I'd always loved animals. We had lots of animals on my farm and at home. And I decided to volunteer at a vet. I thought that would be a great way to spend time with animals. But in reality, I actually fainted when I saw my first operation, which was a little bit embarrassing because I didn't think I was that kind of person. So I realised maybe being a vet was not for me. So I talked to a few different people at school, some guidance counsellors, and I thought, maybe I might want to become a marine biologist. That sounded like something that I could do. There's no blood involved. There's, I could learn a lot of things about the natural world and really help decide on what's happening. But unfortunately, I actually get seasick. So that one was out for me too. So I have thought a little bit more about it. And I do really love being out in the bush, spending time going hiking, going for walks, just looking around and seeing what's out there. And some of my counsellors suggested to me maybe I'd like to be a park ranger, or I could be a zookeeper, or I could be an ecologist, and actually study nature. So I thought, yeah, that sounds really great. I'm going to do that. And in reality, this is actually what happened. I've had some amazing experiences, in my career. It didn't all happen at once. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about, how I got to where I got to and how I got all these amazing experiences that have brought me to where I am today. So I guess, how did I get here? In high school, I was not the best student at science. I was pretty good at it, but I'd say about average. My best subjects were actually music, French, English. I loved art. My absolute worst subject was specialist maths. I was okay at sort of general maths, but I also took specialist maths once I knew I wanted to do science, and it was really hard, but I slogged through it, and it's really come in handy. I'll get to that in a sec. But when you look at, if you go online and you look up, what do I want to be? I want to be an ecologist or a researcher. And you can go online, to the Victorian Youth Central, and it tells you a little bit about the skills that you might need for this kind of career. And the first subject it mentions is maths. So do not be turned off by that, because that was my worst subject, and it hasn't made any difference at all to where I am today. So that's just a little hint there. Those are definitely the subjects that you need, but you don't have to be the best at them. So why did I pick science if it wasn't my best subject, and I wasn't very strong at maths, but I really did. I loved it, and I had a fantastic teacher in grade 11 and 12. Back in that time, we had a bit of a different structure at school, and we basically had a subject called 4-unit science that just encompassed all different sciences. So that was like biology, physics, chemistry, and we did all of them at the same time. And she was just so supportive and really got me through some of the hard bits, especially physics. That was possibly my worst subject ever. But, I also talked to a lot of people about what they did. And in the end, I followed my passion. And my passion was nature and wildlife. And I really wanted to build a career based on that, even if I wasn't exactly sure what exactly about nature and wildlife I wanted to do. But during my high school, and especially during my undergraduate degree at the University of Sydney, I did a lot more than just a Bachelor of Science. I did a lot of volunteer wildlife surveys with the New South Wales National Parks and Wildlife Service. I did some volunteer bush regeneration. I actually took an evening course so that I could learn a little bit more about handling animals because of my interest in zookeeping, and I volunteered at the zoo in Sydney. So all of those experiences were really great in just sort of getting me a bit of a heads up in what I could expect from those careers, and I was really lucky to have those kinds of opportunities. And actually, one of those opportunities, volunteering at the National Park just south of Sydney, Royal National Park, led to my honours project, which is the last year of your undergraduate degree, where you actually get to spend a whole year doing research on something that you're really interested in. And I was really interested in these really tiny little marsupials called eastern pygmy possums. In the surveys that I'd been doing, we'd actually found them in some really, really burnt areas that had this massive wildfire that had gone through, and the rangers were really interested in, well, how are they surviving these huge fires when they're just so tiny, and you'd think they just sort of go up like a puff of smoke. And so that's what I took on for my year of research. I decided to go out into the national park and help the rangers understand, what was happening with these eastern pygmy possums. And it was just a fantastic experience. I'd go out trapping every day, catching them, marking them, tracking them. I'd actually put little spools of cotton thread, you glue them to the back of them, and then you tie one end to a bush. It sounds a bit weird, but hear me through. And then the animal starts running around, and it climbs up all these different bushes, and you can actually tell which flowers it's been visiting, and you can get a lot of information about the individual, what it's eating, where it's resting, that you just wouldn't be able to get in any other way, because they're just so tiny, it's really hard to track them. So some pretty interesting experiences and some novel ways to learn about nature. And then after uni, I decided to take a little bit of a break, and I went to Africa to do some ranger guide training, because I was still really keen on pursuing this dream about working in national parks. So I did this volunteer work in South Africa, helping out track some lions, and I spent about 6 months there in the national parks there. And then I came back, and because of my experience working with rangers and guides in South Africa, I was able to get a job as a tour guide for school students. And I took that job. I spent about 8 years doing that job, basically, taking students from Sydney into the desert of Australia and teaching them about our really unique wildlife and systems. It's a really great program that really helped me share my passion for nature. But at that time, I already knew like that wasn't my, my dream to just be sort of, traveling around as a tour guide the rest of my life. I wanted to do more for conservation and more for nature. I applied for a job up in Cairns at a zoo and ended up being hired as their wildlife educator and zookeeper. So my job was basically to just teach people who came to the zoo about the different animals that we had. I gave talks on the freshwater crocodiles, the pythons, the koalas, and just got people to know about the different kinds of pressures that they're facing today, and also about maybe what we can do to help them. That was a really fantastic experience, but it didn't last for as long as I would like, because I actually discovered zookeeping wasn't really for me. It's something that is just an amazing thing to do, but if you're someone like me that gets really attached to the animals, when they die, you kind of get really, really sad. And I unfortunately would get really attached to the animals, and unfortunately the animals don't live as long as us, so they do die all the time. It was like losing my family pet every time it happened. So I started to sort of think, well, okay, maybe I need to sort of think about something else that I don't get so attached to these amazing animals. And I actually moved to Canada to see if I could do some more study over there. I moved to a beautiful place, St. Louise. It's right in the middle of a national park. But unfortunately, there weren't actually that many jobs there, and there weren't many opportunities to do the study that I thought I could do. And I ended up running a bakery for 3 years. And I actually really loved it. Had a great time. I got a lot of experiences just learning about the wildlife there. Still did a lot of outdoor experience and volunteering, but mainly I was just running a bakery, and it was a pretty amazing place. If you ever get to Lake Louise, it's a great bakery. But at the same time, I was still keeping up this volunteering and just looking for experiences where I could go and help researchers with the research they were doing, because I really had this passion for learning about things and finding out about what makes things go in particular places. Why is this bird there and not there? Why is this? Is this system not looking very good and this system is looking really good? And there's a great research group up in the north of Canada in Manitoba, that's right where the Arctic Circle is, that I spent several months helping out with the research there, and also cooking meals and helping out with dog mushing, and just really learning about the different kinds of research that people do, to learn more about nature and also help wildlife basically survive what humans are doing to it. So I spent a bit of time thinking about my and reflecting on my experiences doing this research, and eventually started looking for positions back in Australia that I could actually take up and really do some conservation. And when I came back to Australia, I got a job with a group called Greening Australia, and they're a national organisation that does restoration of really big landscapes. They go out to farms and plant trees. They do surveys. They also rehabilitate when mining has come in and we need to get back into that land and basically create the system from scratch again. I worked for them for about 2 years and really got a better understanding of, well, what are the pressing issues that Australian wildlife and Australian ecosystems are facing right now, and what can we do about it? And that actually motivated me to go back to university to do a PhD. Basically this 8 years outside of university had given me the experience and the knowledge to understand, well, what I'm seeing is that a lot of researchers at the moment just sort of want to focus on the really interesting species. It's like koalas. Who wouldn't want to study koalas? But actually there's a whole pile of other like animals, plants, systems that are really, really important for us and also for ecosystems that aren't being studied, and we need to know more about them so that we can understand what we can do to restore our plants and animals and nature. I also saw from my experience, working with Greening Australia, that sometimes even when we want to do things, manage, weeds and pests, we're not very effective at it, and we're not very good at evaluating how well we've done, whether we've succeeded in that management. So that's what I wanted to do when I came back to university. I thought I could do some research that will help us get better at managing the threats to nature and also evaluating how well we're doing. So that's what I did. I did a PhD specifically on monitoring how ecosystems respond to when we manage things. And then since then, I've built my career on choosing where, when, and how to save species. So my PhD, I actually travelled to the southwest of Australia and worked in a great place. It's a biodiversity hotspot, which means it's, of all the places in the world, it's one of the places that has the most different animal and plant species of anywhere else. And it's just an amazing place to visit. Unfortunately, it's also got a lot of human pressures acting on it. So in the midst of these amazing creatures that we see there, we have pressures like land clearing for agriculture, invasive pests like foxes and cats that we need to manage in some way. So to solve these problems where we have a whole pile of different pressures acting on nature, and we need to find some solutions, we use a thing called decision science. So what does a conservation decision science actually do? I'd never heard of this type of career when I went to high school. What it does is it actually combines a whole pile of different fields. It combines maths, business, technology, science, ecology, conservation, social science, and brings them together to solve particularly tricky problems. It helps us use the data that we see all around us to improve decisions, and it helps us build tools to find a solution when we have a really particularly nasty one. What I do is I work with farmers, national park managers, government agencies, conservation groups, a whole pile of different people to find these solutions and help them actually get implemented across Australia and also across the world. So if you want to know what decision science is, there's a whole pile of different things that we can build in decision science. Some of them are simple tools like this decision chart that you see here, where we basically step through a problem. Let's say we found a particular animal and we want to know, well, what exactly is it? Well, this is actually a decision tree that would help us solve this. Some of you might have seen these before. We can go through, does it have 5 legs? Is it hiding under your bed? Does it make honey? If it does make honey, yep, it's a honeybee. If it's not, it's probably more likely to be a mosquito. Just in the same way as this decision tree is being developed to identify that weird animal in your house, we can also use this decision science to pick different actions that we would use to recover a particular animal that might have declined because we had cut down its habitat to build a mine or do some agriculture. So some of the tools that I've made are similar to that. This is a tool that I developed that basically helps managers in national parks or in conservation reserves step through the choices that they need to make decisions between to manage particular animals, but also to monitor them so that we know that the actions that we're doing are successful. Sometimes we have systems that look like this. It's really messy. It's basically a giant network where all the different animals are interacting with each other, all the different places are connected. How do we make sense of this information to actually come up with a decision that will help a particular animal or a particular place? Well, decision science can help us there too. You don't have to worry about looking at this. I'm just basically showing you that we can actually turn that giant network into numbers. So every link in that network becomes a number that once you've quantified that, the decision science tool will help you maybe add them up or multiply them or subtract them and find the best solution in that network that would might maybe help you choose the best animal to monitor, so that you can say that your control of the invasive fox has been successful and your animals are recovering after that management. So we don't just do maths, we also do a thing called spatial science. So this is some work that we've done, basically mapping where all of the nomadic, so nomadic means like animals that move around, the nomadic birds can be found in Australia at any one time. So this is basically a time scale from 2001 to 2011, and the really hot white areas are where the black honeyeater on the left is more likely to be, and the blue areas are where it's less likely to be. And once we've built these models, these predictions of where these animals are going to be, we can use them to inform questions like, where is the most important place for that desert bird that we need to protect to ensure that its habitat doesn't get cleared and that its food resources are maintained into the future, and when it comes back there, it will be able to survive. And we can create maps using our decision science tools that tell us exactly where we need to go to protect them. And we can even decide whether or not we need to have different actions for these animals in wet times or in dry times. So I'd just like to finish with telling you, well, I guess, the big thing for this is like, why do I care so much about doing this? And it's because, Australia is unique. We really do need solutions to help us manage and protect our native animals and plants, because most of them are found nowhere else in the world. But unfortunately, Australia's populations of threatened animals actually decreased by 57% since you were born. So that means for every 10 animals that were around in 2000, only 4 are left. So what I've done is I've built my career and built my passion by actually travelling to and working in a whole pile of different places that have given me this really unique experience and knowledge about the kinds of pressures that animals and plants are facing, but also what we can do to solve those pressures and build them safe refuges into the future. We do see a lot of things in the news, about bushfires, about poaching, about droughts, about invasive species. But what we're finding is by using links with organisations, by using decision science, by building these really strong tools for conservation, we can actually improve where, when and how we manage systems, and we actually can save species. Thank you.
That was really great, Ayesha. I'm kind of excited by that. I like animals myself, but it was never something that I kind of went, oh yeah, I want to be a vet. A lot of people say I want to be a vet. It was never, it's like, oh no, I'll just pat them and see them in places. So it's great to meet someone who gets to work with them. I wanted to kind of go a little bit back to your kind of ranger days and things, to doing that, and say, what kind of skills did you find you had to create to do those ranger duties, particularly the ones, I guess, in Africa as opposed to national parks here? What was the kind of difference between doing them here and doing them over there, apart from the animals you encountered?
Yeah, the difference in the animals is a really interesting one. But actually, a lot of the skills that I found, which is so great about that area, is actually they're very transferable. So, by doing things like helping out on biodiversity surveys, going and catching little rats and mice and snakes and things in Royal National Park near Sydney, that actually gave me a really good, really solid foundation in terms of, I guess, firstly, just awareness, what's safe, what are safe practices when you're out there sort of chasing animals around, and what are not safe practices. So that's a really important skill that I learned, in Australia, that could be taken to Africa. I guess, there was still a big learning curve going to Africa, because the wildlife there is just so different. We share a lot of plants across Southern Africa and Australia, but we don't share that much wildlife. So we don't have to worry about getting chased by a lion when we walk out into the bush. So those kinds of skills, it was quite interesting. When we never have to think about what do I need to protect myself from? If I go, can I just go walking in this national park? It's just a given. Anywhere in Australia that you want to go and walk in a national park, you can do it. That's obviously not the same in most places in Africa. You very rarely can go out on your own in a national park because the animals there will try to eat you. But that was an experience I also had in Canada when I was working up in the north of Canada, where the polar bears are. That was another experience that one of the big skills you actually needed was firearms training. And it's not so much so that you can shoot the animal if it's coming towards you. You would never do that. But it's, there's a lot of safe working practices in terms of scaring animals off, the kinds of flares that you can shoot so that they can be scared off, so that you don't get yourself into a situation where you're too close to an animal and they need something else. But those, we're sort of lucky that we don't have that kind of constraint on the work that we do in Australia, which means we can pretty much go anywhere in Australia and study anything we want in our parks, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. And there's so much out there to see. I mean, as you say, so many are unique to Australia in what we have, and even the little teeny tiny ones in your hands.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things I found also when I was traveling, that even though I had this real passion to go to Africa or go to where the polar bears were in Canada and sort of save those big charismatic animals that we all see on TV. That firstly, there's a lot of people already working in that space, because everyone sees David Attenborough or these documentaries of lions and polar bears and wants to go out and save them, and doesn't realise that we have so many unique animals right here in Australia that have never had any kind of research done on them. We don't even know what's causing their declines. We don't even know what food they need. We don't even know what kinds of trees we should be planting if we were going to do restoration to try to recover them. And that's because of this bias that we have on TV, on all around us, for these great, charismatic, fancy animals, and everyone wants to go chase them. And it really kind of came home to me working in all these different places, how many people were chasing these big, charismatic animals, and how few people are actually working on the really important animals and plants in Australia.
It's a great thing. Do you have, I know that your first one was probably one of your favourite, but is there one that's been really an interesting study to do where you found something that you didn't really expect to find that they did?
All the time. I think that's one of the wonderful things about working in ecology and conservation, just how you're constantly surprised about things that they do. Obviously the eastern pygmy possums, nobody expected this tiny little fluffy thing to be able to survive wildfires. But even in the most recent wildfires that we've had in the 2019-2020 that so many people were affected by, we're finding that there's tiny little frog species that have had their entire habitat completely destroyed by fire. How far can a frog hop? Not very far. So, but they're still surviving in these places in, tiny little under pocket of grass that they might have just been able to shelter while the rest of the fire went around them. And it just goes to show that, that nature can be really resilient if we just give it a little bit of a chance, and if we can learn about the kinds of things that will just keep the animals and plants kind of holding on, then we can really contribute so much to keeping them all around us and not missing out on them disappearing in the next few years. And
you mentioned way back that maths was your worst subject in high school, and then you ended up having maths in that decision science and things. Were you kind of very scared to go, oh God, now we'll come back to the maths again and to do it, or is it coming?
Yeah, I was. And I think, one of the things, that sort of took me more down this sort of applied path to start with, working as a ranger and as a zookeeper, was that, it was more sort of working with my hands, working with, just pure on like my passion for animals. And when I came back and I did my PhD, and I realized to really solve these kind of difficult problems that I wanted to solve, I would need to use maths. It was a little bit scary for me. It was very scary for me at the start. But one of the things I learned that was that, part of my fear of maths was actually the way it was taught back then. It was a while ago. So, just learning about it in a different way. So learning about it from people who are really passionate about the decision science as well, who could explain it to me in a way that made sense in terms of, this maths is going to solve this particular problem, versus the way that I learned it a lot, in high school, which was more just, solve this quadratic equation. And I would just sort of be like, for what? Like, why am I solving this quadratic equation? But if you know that, oh, well, I need to solve this equation because at the end of that equation, I'll actually learn what the benefit of that action was for, recovering that koala in that place. It really helps you understand, well, what are the parts of that equation? Why did I need that thing there and that thing there? Oh, that thing represents, its food. That thing represents how much it reproduces. And it becomes a lot more of a practical question rather than just numbers on a page.
Yeah, no, it's out there. But following on from the maths and into the modelling, have you ended up doing a lot more on the computers than in the field, or is it a little bit of both?
Yeah, so definitely these days I work much more on computers than in the field, mainly because there's a lot of amazing field data that is already being collected by park rangers, by different government organisations, by conservation organisations. So they're by citizen scientists, and so that those kinds of databases are being created, but most of those organisations don't have the skills to actually do something with that data. So that's where someone like me comes in. I talk to the rangers, or I talk to farmers who are collecting information on their properties or in their parks, and I ask them, well, what kinds of problems do you have? And on farms, they might be trying to figure out, well, I'd really like to do some tree planting on my farm, but I still need to make money. Like, this farm still needs to be profitable. So how can I balance restoring some habitat so that some of the native wildlife comes back with the need to still be profitable and earn income, because this is my job. And so we can use decision science. We bring in some economics and some maths to sort of balance out those benefits and those costs. And that's really all done on the computer, but still working with the people who are on the land, going out and visiting them, talking to them, often collecting data from them. The work that I do, I still get out into the field, which is really great because I love being out in the field. But a lot of that is more, rather than collecting my own data to sort of build a database, it's more working with the other people who are collecting the data, helping them sort of improve their system so that they're collecting the right kind of information so that we can really answer the questions that they get. And it's kind of even better than when I was collecting my own data, because it means I can go to a whole lot of different places, from working with organisations in Madagascar who are, trying to save some lemur populations. So I got to go out and hang out with the lemurs for a while, and that was, pretty amazing. Back to Australia, working with organisations with BirdLife and going out to visit the birds that they're recovering. So it really, it gives me this amazing, diverse experience of the places and the animals and the plants that people are trying to recover, and then sort of coming back and using the information that I've got from them, either on spreadsheets or just from my talking to them, and then using that to solve their problem.
Really, a good problem solver. Are you finding that you have more people who we wouldn't traditionally associate with conservation, like farmers and those sorts of groups, coming to you and saying, hey, how can we manage our properties better and help the native wildlife?
Yeah, and I think it's often like a misconception that farmers don't don't sort of, like have a passion for conservation or all that. I think definitely, a lot of the farmers that I work with, out in Western, sort of far Western Queensland, so that's like right in the middle of the desert, basically. They know that they need to look after the land, because the land is actually what's providing them with their living. But, there is always that sort of, trade-off between, how do I look after the land in the best way, but, but also still, make enough money that can support me and my family. And especially, some of the places that I've worked in Africa, that's even more of a struggle, because, the farms in Australia, some people, own as much land as, like a small country in Europe. Whereas, in Africa, a lot of families just have a tiny, tiny little plot of land, and they really have to try to get as it could be only, 10 meters long, and they have to try to make all the food for their entire year, and all their family out of that one little plot, while still trying to look after it in the best way possible, so it will stay healthy into the future. And obviously the more chemicals you put into the land, the more you sort of take out of it, the less healthy that's going to be into the future. So really trying to think about ways that they can improve their land by, planting particular kinds of crops that are healthy for them, and balancing those needs, their needs for well-being and health with the needs of the land. It has become a lot more of an important question in conservation. I think maybe 20 or 30 years ago, it was much more just focused on save the animals kind of thing. So, all we need to do is, build some fences around the national parks, or save the trees and the koalas will be okay. And it's really now, we all know that that's not enough. It's really about helping the people who are living in the environments to make better decisions, and supporting the people who are in those environments. And so that's why, in one of my slides, I mentioned that, decision science also includes things like social science. You can come into the career that I'm doing right now with a completely different trajectory. So I came from an ecology and conservation and field trajectory, but I have colleagues who came from a social science trajectory. So they studied social science at university, and learned more about that side of, the human side of conservation, and then they came in from that side. So it's quite it's a really diverse field that we have, and lots of different people who work in it.
That's what makes it great, isn't that? Collaboration of different ideas in science, and people come with different things. I'm keen to say, is there a project you really want to work on, or you'd really like to see happen, that it's like a dream project as we're going forward, something you think in the future would be something we could look at?
Yeah, I do. I have lots of dream projects, but I think right now we have, it's a really interesting time where we're sort of learning about how much our food consumption really affects biodiversity, like, animals, plants, nature, the environment, but also like our own health. And I think, there's just in the last few years, there's been all sorts of really great research by medical teams, but also by people who work in the environment, that are just starting to learn about the kinds of foods that, if we eat them, if we plant them, if we grow them, that will benefit the environment and also benefit us. And I think there's really great opportunities to learn about, alternatives to some of the really big, degrading activities that happen across the world. And the biggest contributor to climate change, and also to habitat loss of wildlife, is agriculture, and specifically beef cattle and dairy cattle. So, thinking about, well, what are the alternatives that we can do? Obviously, we can't just, stop farming beef and dairy, but are there alternatives in terms of what people would like to eat, but also in terms of what farmers can do on their lands, that can really help us transition to different kinds of diets that are healthier for us and also for the environment.
Yeah, I think we're starting to see ourselves as part of the whole, and not like the world's over there and we're over here kind of thing, which is a great thing to look at. I guess the probably the very last question is, have something you like to have told your year 10 self that was fainting in the vet surgery?
Yeah, I think that my main advice was don't stress out if it doesn't work out. I think because I really I would really get, you know, I'd set my dream on this one thing, and then when it didn't work out, I would get quite upset about it, and I'd just sort of think to myself, oh, you know, what am I going to do? You know, what's my future? I can't, you know, and you know, there was sort of big challenges that I had to overcome to realize that it's okay if you fail at a particular thing that you thought you'd really want to do, because it's a learning experience, and it actually helps you discover what you do want to do, you know, rather than sticking it out in something that you either, you know, you get sick every time you do something, or, you know, or it doesn't inspire you and it doesn't, you know, bring you joy. You know, being able to be flexible and just accept when it's, you know, it's not working out, and be confident that you'll find the right thing.
Yeah, and I think having some good teacher advice is good as well, isn't it? Someone who says, hey,
Really
try
good.
this thing.
Yeah, just talking to as many, I think the experience that I've had is like talking to as many people about what they do, but also experiencing it, doing that volunteer work. And, you know, it kind of annoys me that, you know, we have to tell, you know, young people that the only way to get ahead is to do volunteer work, because there's so many, you know, obviously that means that that's taking time away from your personal life, your you know, your work if you need to do it, but it really does make a difference, even if you can only do it, you know, a few times. Just getting that practical experience of what the people actually do out there versus just seeing it on TV just makes such a difference, and it actually shows you whether or not you can do it or not, you know, like me with the vet. I would never have known.
That's it. I don't want to go through uni and then faint.
Yeah.
Get your hands in there and get dirty. And I think, yeah, science is all about getting your hands on it and giving it a go. So it's been great. It's been really lovely listening to your journey and to all the wonderful animals you've been working with everywhere, and I kind of look forward to seeing how we can help do a lot more conservation in the future. So thank you to Dr. Tulloch today, and also thank you all for joining us, and don't forget to fill out our feedback survey and let us know, you know, what you want to hear next. But we will see you, and our next talk is on Thursday next week, and that will be our last one for the year, and we have a whole lot lined up for next year, so we've got lots of scientists to speak still. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.